Greetings to you. When the EU foreign ministers decided not to impose new and tougher sanctions on this Mnangagwa regime for failing to hold free, fair, credible elections last July and for using excessive violence to cow the nation into submission, it was a very foolish decision and betrayal of the long-suffering Zimbabweans fighting for democratic change. However, the decision was manna from heaven for the ZANU-PF regime and its apologists. The alleged heavy-handedness of the security services in response to the disturbance of 1st August 2018 and 14th January 2019 have been cited by those who maintain that there is no difference between the old and the new dispensation, pitched in Ponzo, Saruchera in Polowe 24. The proponents of this narrative have, however, deliberately ignored that what came first were carefully planned acts of violence by Western-sponsored opposition MDC and pseudo-civic society organization meant to destabilize the country. They know that adding this bit would somehow dilute the verification of the country's security agents and apportion the blame to the actual orchestrators of the violence. No, Sarachia, the blatant vote rigging of the 30th July 2018 elections happened first. The heavy-handed security service response on the 1st of August 2018 was to silence those protesting yet another rigged elections. The violent reaction by the security services on the 14th of January 2019 was sparked by the nearly 200% increase in fuel prices and the shortages of fuel, foreign currency, etc. The country's worsening economic situation is itself a byproduct of the rigged elections. And the overreaction by the regime was to once again silence the protesters. Even you, Saruchera, with all your skills for twisting and distorting facts, cannot change the sequence of events of 30th July 2018 elections. So they happen after those of the 1st of August 2018 and much less those of 14th January 2019. Of course, the state security services were heavy-handed because there was no justification for the shoot-to-kill order on the two occasions. None. ZANU-PF has used brute force to establish and retain the de facto one-party dictatorship in operation ever since Zimbabwe's independence in 1980. The party's modus operandi is to blow any lawlessness situation that is there way out of proportion, then use the exaggerated threat as cover for its own overt lawlessness operation to ruthlessly crush the regime's opponents and critics. In the early 1980s, ZANU-PF used the existence of a few hundred at most dissidents as cover to launch Kukurahundi, in which over 20,000 defenseless civilians were murdered. The party wanted to crush PF SAPO, its main political opponent at the time. In the end, the regime forced PF SAPO to sign the Unity Accord to form the de facto one-party state. ZANU-PF has used the same dirty tactic of blowing a minor security incident out of all proportion to justify its use of excessive force to silence its critics and impose its dictatorial rule again and again in the last 38 years, and is using it now. Art of punishing the dog, the opponent, with concealed weapon, as one would say in short. Mnangagwa has gone to great lengths to sell the post-November 2017 coup as having transformed ZANU-PF into a democratic party, the new dispensation. To back up his claim, he has promised to end corruption and to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Sadly, he has failed to keep any of his promises. He never, ever meant to keep any of the promises, and hence never implemented even one token democratic reform, for example. Mnangagwa employed the same vote rigging and vote buying schemes. He, as Mugabe's principal enforcer, had employed to keep ZANU-PF and Mugabe in power. And except for Mugabe and one or two others put it out of the dictatorship during the coup, he has kept the same thugs to implement the schemes. A hyena will roll in elephant dung to disguise its own scent for the purposes of hunting. There is no question that it is still a hyena. ZANU-PF under Mnangagwa was still the same corrupt, incompetent, and murderous dictatorship. Calling itself a new dispensation is nothing more than a hyena rolling in elephant dung. The recent decision by the European Union Council not to extend sanctions on members of the Zimbabwean government as proposed by EU Parliament and Britain speaks volumes with regards to President Mnangagwa. Sincerity to better the lives of locals. The EU must have looked at President Mnangagwa's track record since assuming office and gave him the benefit of the doubt against the opposition and pseudo civic organizations unverified claims, concluded the inveterate apologist and liar, Saruchera. The EU foreign ministers did not have to go far to find Mnangagwa's track record. The EU Zimbabwe Election Observer Mission report said it all. The major shortcomings in the pre-elections environment impacted on free expression of the will of electors. State resources were misused in favor of the incumbent, and coverage of state media was heavily biased in favor of the ruling party, said the EU mission's final report. Further, the Electoral Commission lacked full independence and appeared not always to act in an impartial manner. The final results, as announced by the Election Commission, contained numerous errors, lacked adequate traceability, transparency, and verifiability. Finally, the restrictions on political freedoms, the excessive use of force by security forces, and the abuse of human rights in the post-election period undermined the corresponding positive aspects during the pre-election campaign. As such, many aspects of the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe failed to meet international standards. We can be pretty certain that the EU foreign ministers were never, not for 1 second, fooled by Mnangagwa's elephant dung scent. They have known all along that he is corrupt, incompetent, and a murderous thug. The thug who became the top dog after the November 2017 coup. The real reason the EU foreign ministers lifted the sanctions of some of the ZANU-PF thugs when everyone else was calling for new, tougher, and extended sanctions to be imposed on the regime is very simple. Trade. Belgium has campaigned long and hard for the sanctions to be lifted so that it can finally access Zimbabwe's diamonds. China, Russia, Israel, India, and a number of other countries who have ignored ZANU-PF's checkered human rights record for the sake of trade have profited greatly, and Belgium wanted in on the act. Period. Belgium has never cared about the freedom and rights and human rights of Black Africans. And so it is no surprise that the EU mission report, damning report, meant nothing to the Belgian and other similarly minded EU members. Absolutely nothing. The EU ministers lifted sanctions on ZANU-PF regime because they were impressed by Mnangagwa's sincerity and democratic track record. Every EU racist must have loved that. Mnangagwa blatantly rigged the elections and has been busy murdering innocent people, and the blacks around him, not the white racists, are praising him to the high heavens. Proof that blacks are indeed incapable of self-governing. Besides, the EU racists must have argued, it is now nearly 20 years since the EU imposed sanctions against the ZANU-PF thugs, and yet nothing has changed. There have been many opportunities to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship, and they've all been wasted. So why should the EU nationals continue to be denied the chance to join the Chinese, Russians, etc. in the exploitation and looting of Zimbabwe's wealth and resources? Of course, the racists in Brussels won the day. Mnangagwa and his junta were rewarded for rigging last July's elections. And they know the EU will turn a blind eye to the regime's brutal repression as long as the EU has a share of the spoils of Zimbabwe's looted wealth. Our fight for freedom, human rights, and human dignity will continue, albeit that much tougher now that the EU is fighting its ZANU-PF squad. Thank you for listening.